little bit about me. My name is Andee Baker. I'm originally from Park City, Montana, which is just outside of Billings. Went to Bozeman at Montana State University, go Bobcats, where I double majored in agriculture, communications, and psychology with a minor in agriculture business. And then currently I'm in Washington, D.C., working in health and human services to increase rural access to healthcare. So I've kind of always been involved in agriculture. I grew up on what my dad likes to call like a funny farm. So it wasn't super big. We had about 25 acres. Depending on the year, we would do hay or corn, depending on what was needed more. And then we did, of course, swine, and we had a couple cattle for my brother because he had to have them. Grew up sort of surrounded by that, but then my mom was also the extension agent in Yellowstone County, and so then got heavily involved in 4-H, like literally born into it. There's pictures of her in August. I was born in October, 2 months before county fair, and so I attended my first county fair like 2 months before I was even born, and so just kind of always been a part of it. It's been a big part for me. Got involved in 4-H all through high school and things, and then of course I joined FFA. I think just about everybody does that. 4-H and FFA go hand in hand in my opinion. And so then I was fortunate enough to become the 4-H state president, got to advocate for that on a state level, and then became the state FFA treasurer, where I got to continue advocating, meeting with people all around that. Throughout college, I got involved a lot with Farm Bureau, mostly because of FFA. When I first attended our first We Do training events, it was in the Farm Bureau building, and they were the most comfortable chairs I've ever experienced in my life. And I'm like, I gotta get involved more with Farm Bureau. And so upon doing that, I then joined Collegiate Young Farmers and Ranchers, then really got involved with the Farm Bureau program, really stood behind the mission, was fortunate enough to become a leadership, education, and outreach intern with the American Farm Bureau out in DC. Truly fell in love with it. Came back to Montana, did the ACE program, just continued to stay as involved through that. And then otherwise in college, I joined Sigma Alpha, which is a professional egg sorority, did College of Egg Ambassadors, just truly trying to share the importance of agriculture, and that agriculture is for all, because there's so many ways to be involved, and continuing to do that. And through all my experiences, I noted a gap in healthcare, especially for farmers and ranchers in the agriculture community, which has led me to where I am now. I've always been a big advocate for mental health, but that didn't really happen until mid to late high school. My journey with mental health actually started in the 8th grade, and I had kind of heard about mental health like a little bit. This was like pre-COVID, pre-mental health being on the forefront. Nobody really talked about it. Like, oh, they would say he's just stressed out, or they're having a tough week, and it was really like before people even talked about it. And fortunately for me, one of my teachers was able to show this video that said, if you don't feel right, even at the happiest of times, you might not be feeling okay, and it's okay not to be okay. And in 8th grade, what on the outside, everything should have looked perfect, you know. I was fortunate enough to be pulled up as an 8th grader to play on a high school basketball team, which is like super common in C schools across here in Montana, but it's also like a super big deal. So I had that going for me. Grades were looking good, and I just still felt like nothing was right. And so I knew that something was wrong, but I didn't know what. And fortunately for me, my mom and I have always had a close relationship, and so we broke down in the gas station parking lot when my brother ran in for a jug of milk, and I said, Mom, I just don't know if I belong here. And she's like, what do you mean? Like in Park City? Like, and I'm like, I don't know if I'm meant to be like on Earth or alive. And she's like, okay. And we cried and we talked about it, and she's like, let's get you to talk to somebody. She's like, I love you, I want you here, but let's find something of how that matters. And being the super mom that she is, she found me a really great doctor, who then was like, hey Andee, you have depression and anxiety. And I'm like, cool, what does that even mean? Like, because you hear those terms, but especially at that time, you hear depression and you're like psych ward, like you know, like what does that even mean? But I was fortunate to get connected to a therapist, and that's kind of when I realized that I wasn't abnormal. I wasn't like a bad kid for having these thoughts. I wasn't like gonna become like a drug addict, or you know, like some of like those worst fears of things when you think that you're not doing everything right. And in doing all of that, I realized things I saw in myself, I saw in my classmates, I saw in my teachers, I still saw and continue to see in my family and the people around me. And so whenever someone is willing to listen, or just maybe needs someone to listen to them, I'm always happy to share or listen to that mental health piece of it, because it's not weird, and I know that that's becoming more of a social norm, that it's okay, but I know still a lot of people struggle with it. When I was an FFA state officer, I gave what is, to my knowledge, the first FFA retiring address that talked about mental health and the struggles with that. And at this point in my life, I'd been pretty open with my mental health. Like, everyone I graduated with, like, maybe I was like the crazy, you know, like the village crazy lady of like, you want to talk about depression, you want to talk about anxiety, like, let's talk about it. And I had never thought about sharing it on such a small scale, or such a large scale. I'd always shared it to people or talking in conversations. And I realized in actually one of our FFA trainings in the Farm Bureau building with the comfy chairs, that our facilitator, his name was Ethan Dato, he was like, I would just love to hear someday a speech about mental health from an FFA officer. And I'm like, because I had been trying to figure out what to write my retiring address on, because especially when you're an FFA officer, there's such a pressure to have like this amazing retiring address. And I'm like, I didn't know what to talk about. I'm like, I felt like I was pretty normal at that point. I'm like, I did the sports, I came from a small town, like I related to a lot of people, but what was it that I could say that people wanted to hear, or that I think people needed to hear? And so I ended up writing my speech about mental health, and I wrote it over Christmas break, which is about 4 months prior to the FFA convention. And I wrote it and I didn't look at it for 3 months, because I was like, okay, that was the most real you've ever been with anything ever. I even had written another speech about like finding yourself, like, you know, when things don't work out, because I had an injury in sports, like finding yourself in other ways, which was not an unknown concept and felt a lot safer. But in March of 2020, if you all can remember, that might have been when a major pandemic hit. And what I realized is there was just a major loss of connection immediately. Like, people were reaching out to our state officer team saying, how can we be connected? I helped create a program that did boxes, but it just was, and for those of you that experienced it, it just was this epic sense of loneliness and like terror. Like, I remember cleaning out my dorm room, like, and they're like, go come back for spring break, and the streets are empty. Like, that is a terrifying feeling. And so I pulled out the speech that I had written 3 months ago, and I was like, this is what people need to hear. And so I rewrote it, being more real with even the story than I was originally, and I decided to share it. And I'm really glad that I did. I got a lot of feedback from people saying, but you're so successful, like, this is not normal. And it really meant something that people then could talk about it. And since then, there have been so many other speeches, and I'm not sure if anyone had even seen mine or if that even matters. But I know I got through at least, actually I remember specifically 3 handwritten letters from people saying, I needed to hear that this week, and that was it. And when it comes to being vulnerable and sharing the mental health, it kind of has worked well for me in being kind of a cutting edge idea, which blows my mind a little bit. They're like, yeah, Andee talks about mental health from rural communities. She's like on the cutting edge of everything. And I'm like, but should I be? And so with that, I've been fortunate enough to receive like a national award with the Truman Scholarship and some other major recognitions. And while I'm honored for those achievements, and I'm extremely grateful, I just see them as opportunities to do things for the people that I know can benefit for it. So like, I'm using the connections that I've made in the Truman Scholarship to now work in rural healthcare access, because I know that I want to give back. Like, I have been somehow put in this place where I have the ability to make a change, and it's going to be slow, and it might not even happen in my lifetime. But by sharing and being vulnerable about my mental health, I've had those opportunities, and I'm just not gonna let that go, because people need to hear that, whether older, younger generations. And I have a platform that lets me be able to do that. And so I'm grateful for the achievements, and I'm thankful for the vulnerability and the things that I have to do so. As we talked about earlier, in 7th grade I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. Coming up in November, a couple months now, I guess, coming up in November, I'll be in therapy for 10 years. It's changed over time. Like the stress changed. I've moved across the country, so there's different stressors, but also mental health and the diagnoses and the way people are diagnosing is changing, especially for women out there, is that turns out the treating of my anxiety and depression was treating the surface symptoms of what I now know as my ADHD. And in doing that has changed so many things. And I've been in this process head first for 10 years, and we're still learning. I just want to say that it's okay if it doesn't work out immediately. If you decide to try a medication, doesn't work out. If you don't vibe with your first therapist or the first person you may talk to, try someone else. Always be kind of open to the willingness to change, and that knowing that the practices are evolving. Behavioral health services, unfortunately, are behind physical health services, and so just being open to those possibilities and being willing to look if it's something that you need, that you know you need. You can find the right provider out there for you that fits what you care about, and that if it is hard, like, you can reach out to people. Always reach out to me. I know Farm Bureau knows how to get a hold of me, but it's something that is doable and is changeable, and that your mental health can change seasonally, weekly, monthly, sometimes daily, and knowing that it's not a setback, it's life. I absolutely think that mental health is seen very different in farming and ranching communities, mostly because I think there's been many reasons. I've done research projects, I've helped publish materials, but at the bottom of it is it's this I know, and I've heard it used before, but I just think it rings so true, is this sense of pull yourself up by your bootstraps. My dad has it, my grandpa had it, I have it, my brother has it, of this thought that getting help is a weakness, and that stigma is just such a barrier. And so when I have even gone and put out materials or like tabled for various research projects I've done, people pick up a material and they're like, this is awesome for my wife or my daughter or my brother or my husband needs this, which is something I can completely relate to. And I think that in a perfect world, people would be able, the agriculture community would say like, no, it's okay, I need help. But even people saying, I think that my friend could use this is a step forward. Knowing that stigma is there, and recognizing it and knowing that barrier. But on the other side of it, there's also a provider shortage. Is that if a therapist comes per se out of New York City, how are they going to understand weather or all of these uncontrollable things? Because they're like, why are you stressed that it's raining? And like a farmer is like, this is everything. Like, the rain and the water is everything. And so then it's a lack of understanding from the provider side as well. And I know that there are many great organizations that are now training therapists specifically to work in those rural communities. And so there is progress to be made on both sides, from the farmer and rancher perspective to the people trying to reach those farmers and ranchers. But it just is that it's one of those last places to be reached, and that people are coming in from all sides, and knowing that it will get there someday gives me some hope. But there are just so many barriers from both sides that take a while to come down. I think it's hard to boil down what would work for somebody into to a single message, because it's going to be different for everyone. There's been some terms that like still resonate with me, but in my opinion may have been overused, such as like the "you're enough," "it's okay not to be okay," which are completely true. And I think that if I could boil it down to one statement, which is so difficult because everyone is so different, I would just say that check in on yourself and check in on your friends. Being able to know where you stand with yourself and being able to care about those people around you is the first step. Checking in, was this a really hard week? And being able to say, yeah, it was. Or no, this week was awesome. and like, or then being able to ask a friend that, because even starting that conversation is that first step to even that self-recognition.